Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lucy Gray, and I'm here with some friends, Don Buckley and Andrew Ravin, who I will introduce in a moment. Um, but we're happy to see you, and if you're here too, you can introduce yourself in the chat, and we'll get started in a minute. Don, you are frozen for us, so I don't know what's going on there. Maybe your bandwidth is a little limited. He's coming back in, it looks like. He's going to leave and come back in. So it's Friday, it's the end of the school year, and I know we all are tired, but we're still excited to have a special guest today to talk about education innovation in the middle school setting. And Actionable Innovations Conversations is a series that we do periodically with people that Don and I and other people find interesting. So Don visited Andrew recently, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that visit in a few minutes. But this series is called Actionable Innovations Conversations, and our group is called Actionable Innovations Global. And we're a group of educators who are interested in pushing education forward, and we host events to connect people around the world and introduce interesting ideas to this professional learning community. Um, we've kind of refined what we do. You may have seen this slide before, but we've kind of edited it a little bit. There's a lot of language there, but essentially we're a professional learning community that includes everyone, and we're looking to um, change the world by providing meaningful and impactful learning experiences for all learners in support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that's a little bit about us. We used to be called the Global Education Conference Network, if you remember that. And we have a signature event in November called GLOW, or Global Learning for an Open World. We are also starting to host other events, including an AI conference coming up in August. We changed the date from June to August because we felt that teachers would be more ready to learn then. So if you're interested, please look up our event. It's listed in various places. There's a QR code here. And I'll bring the slide up at the end of the conversation as well, too. So that's coming up August 7th. And we also are going to be meeting up face to face at the ISTE conference in Philadelphia a week from Sunday, which is really coming up fast. So if you're going to be at the ISTE conference, we have a global collaborator meetup planned with lots of fun things to do, and it will be a great way to build your global professional learning community. So that is coming up in person in Philadelphia for those people who are going to the International Society for Technology and Education conference taking place in just about a week. You can follow us at linktree/actionableinno, and you'll find our online community. You'll find our Medium blog, where Don has been writing like a fiend lately. And you will also find our community group on LinkedIn and that sort of thing. So feel free to look up linktree/actionableinno, and you'll get all the information you need about our community. Today, I would love for you to introduce yourself if you're here in the chat. If you are watching us from LinkedIn, the chat is a little bit separated from Hopin and from YouTube. So you may not see everything. We'll try to make sure that you get the links that you need and that sort of thing by posting them. Um, and we'd love to know who you are, where you're from, and if you want to share your Twitter handle or your LinkedIn profile. This is meant to be a networking event so that you can connect with other innovators around the world. So please feel free to say hello in the chat, and we'll get started in a second here. I'm going to turn this over to Don now, who's going to introduce our special guest, and he's going to plague him with the famous Proust questionnaire. So over to you, Don.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Welcome, Andrew, and everyone else out there in Zoomiland. So I met Andrew a few weeks ago, actually maybe a month or a bit more. And I guess our connection was TC, Teachers College Columbia, where I know Andrew has taught at some point. I was looking at your LinkedIn earlier, Andrew, where I teach a graduate class in design thinking. And I guess my name came up somehow, and we had obviously people in the same network, because I've been involved in a lot of startup schools in New York. And he wanted to connect. And I said, can I do a site visit? And he said, yeah, come on out. So out I went to Brooklyn and had a great visit at the school, which is why I was thinking, oh my God, let's get Andrew on the show. So welcome, Andrew. I know you're a Michigan graduate and TC like me, and
Yes,
worked for the NYE DOE for quite a bit of time, right?
that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. And yeah, so Andrew, I'm going to jump right into the Bruce questionnaire, which people out in Zoom land, if you want to write your answer in the chat, we'd like this. Essentially, these are questions that Marcel Proust answered way back in the day in a sort of book format, which was very popular in sort of Victorian parlor games. And these questions are often still used by interviewers today. I discovered them at the back of Van Der magazine. And yeah, that just will get us warmed up and going. So here's our first one, Andrew. Who is your favorite hero of fiction?
Who's my favorite hero in fiction? Well, that is a great question. I'm going to say, oh, geez, that's a stumper. Greatest hero in fiction. I'm gonna go with. There was a young woman in a book called The Lemon by Mohammed Murabet. I'm forgetting her name, but she was working through her kind of early adulthood at a time when I was working through my early adulthood when I read it, and the exploration, the ups and downs that she went to really connected to me. I guess that's my answer.
Okay, great. Well, I haven't heard that one before, but anyway, mine is Batman, which
Okay.
people often find odd because the sort of Batman we now know is sort of evil often, whereas I grew up in the 70s in Ireland where I watched Batman religiously, that Batman,
Okay.
and I was obsessed with it and played Batman and Robin after school and the whole thing. So it has great childhood memories for me from across the park.
It's a much better answer, and unfortunately reveals me as a little bit too much of a literature snob in my answer. I like your answer much better.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of practice with this. Keep in mind, I've been doing this for a while. Okay, we'll do one more, Andrew, and then run right into the more serious stuff. But which words are or Lucy, did we get anyone from outside piping in?
Just me saying that I love Anne Shirley and Miss Stacy in the Anne of Green Gables series, which I read in middle school. And if you've ever seen, I say this every time, so I need to change it up a little bit. But if you've ever seen the Canadian Broadcasting series of Anne of Green Gables that was done about, I don't know, 20 years ago, it's like so true to the book. And that's my favorite hero of fiction, I think. There are others, but just off the top of my head, that's what I think is exciting.
Okay, second question and last one, Andrew, is which words or phrases do you most overuse?
I absolutely overuse the phrase, do you know what I mean? Before I was an educator, I was a social worker. And I think it started out as like an attempt to make sure, right, we understood each other, but it's become something that's a little bit, it's part of now a caricature that people use to make fun of me.
Nice. And Lucy, what's yours, or is anyone else chiming in?
Mine is awesome. It sounds like I'm 13 when I say that, which is okay because we're talking about middle school today and we love middle school. But I think I say that way too often. And I think there are more descriptive words out there instead of saying that's fantastic or terrific or incredible or, whatever. I think I could vary my vocabulary a little bit. I have not seen too many people responding in the chat, but we've got people from Virginia and we've got people from Chile. So people are starting to kind of come in and hopefully they'll respond in the chat in a moment.
Yeah. So I have a new very, very deliberate overused word, which is starting to irritate people right, left, and center, right, Lucy? Which is y'all.
Okay.
Oh, you just have to stop, Don. I was glad to see today in your Instagram feed that you have a friend that also objects to y'all.
Yeah, and that was all the way from Dublin, so I guess it was even annoying people there. But exactly, who I don't even know if they know the interpretation. But anyway, yeah. But prior to that, it was amplify or in my orbit. They're things I always use as well. But
Okay.
anyway. Okay, so Andrew, first off, why did you start your school, and tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. The most important reason why we started our school is because early adolescence matters so much. And I believe that we ignore the importance of this stage of development. I think over the last, say, 25 to 30 years, we've actually made incredible progress in early childhood education, which matters, developing print-rich environments, play as a form of learning to help get our young people in equitable context. But as we get into fourth, fifth, sixth grade, as the content becomes more complex, as our bodies become more complex, our education stops being connected to our developmental identities. And so this has stuck out to me both as a social worker and an educator as the highest leverage area. Too often we then jump to high school for college and career readiness. And what I always say is you can spend $1 in high school for 10 cents return, or you can spend $1 in middle school and still get the impact for your dollar. And so it seems to me that if we help build middle school education that matches early adolescent development, will change the world. And so a little bit about us is, a school platform that attends to early adolescent developmental challenges, interests, and needs. What does that mean? We have a smaller school model so every young person can be seen and heard every single day. That matters. Hands-on, real-world, project-based learning, because this age students are able to think through complex abstract ideas, but they benefit from rooting them in concrete hands-on projects. And then a truly diverse and equitable community where young people learn and experience all of this in the context of people who don't always look like them or sound like them.
Right. Great. And Andrew, can you give the audience a context of where your school is located, the neighborhood, etc.?
Yes, we're in Brooklyn, New York, the neighborhood of Prospect Lefferts. Prospect Lefferts is close to Prospect Park, but it's on the other side of Prospect Park, so to speak. All of our students come from the ring around the park, which is the Central Park in Brooklyn. Our goal was to be in a location where we had access to students from all different cultures, communities, and socioeconomic backgrounds, because part of our focus is making sure there is no majority race, culture, or socioeconomic status.
Right. And Andrew, how about the application process? Is it via lottery, or can you tell us a little bit about that?
It is not via lottery at this time. We are in our fourth year, so we're building up to scale. We started one grade at a time. So our incoming grade each year has gotten a little bit larger. At scale will be 25 students per grade. This year, I believe we had 20 graduates, 22 students entering seventh grade next year, and so on. So we're growing each year. What we do is we try to identify different buckets for socioeconomic status to help ensure that we have representation, but we accept students at all different academic levels.
Right. Wow. Okay. So I want to jump aside for a while, Andrew, from your school, and I want you maybe to tell us a little bit about the Innovative Schools Co-op that you also founded. I think the audience will find this really interesting.
Yeah. So, when I was working to start this school, I actually traveled the country to meet with all sorts of education leaders and thinkers. I wanted to get a sense of what existed out in the world. And the truth is, I found so many more transformative and incredible schools and school communities than I thought. It's true. There's a lot of challenge in education, especially in our larger school systems, but there are so many incredible schools and school visionaries out there. So I was traveling across the country and I met with people everywhere from Texas to Oregon to California, Idaho, Boston, and so on. I realized that almost all of us were swimming on our own. And so I started to ask these schools, would you be interested in being part of a cooperative community? There's no requirements that you have to have a certain model. The only requirement is that you're open source and agree to share your program, your model, your curriculum with anyone else in the group. And so we're currently, I think, at 12 schools from across the country, all innovative, independent schools that have a commitment to, great high leverage, progressive education.
I see. Okay. And so, yeah, because I guess that was how we got connected, was with, I know you're good friends with Kate.
Yes.
Who started the Hudson Lab School, and she's the one that introduced us. And a lot of my other buddies in the other startup schools. So after, so I was thinking about this after I left your school, right? The question that I have. So just for some background, I teach a design thinking class at Teachers College Columbia, second semester graduate class. And 4 of my classes, I take my students on what are called voyages. So I take them off the campus into an environment where I want them to see stuff and become better observers. It's just, a different point of view, because I'm a big believer in, and that was why when you and I wanted to talk, I said, can I do a site visit? Because it's like the best thing, I feel, to go to a school and just deploy.
Absolutely.
The Portfolio School, which was co-founded by Barbara and Doug, I know you know them well, friends of mine, was one voyage for my Columbia students. And of course, as we know, this just closed doors. Yeah. And I called Barbara and I said, look, can I come down? And he said, Don, we're closing. And so literally I've run out of startup schools in New York because it was another stable run by Alex Ragone, who's a friend of mine. I don't know if you know Alex. He's now down DC area. That's gone. So slowly, these schools are just shutting down. And so I guess my question is, like, we've seen a bunch of startup schools close down, and actually most recently the Portal schools, and I know Ivan, who has been on this show before, is on or going. Why is it hard to sustain a startup school, and how have you survived?
It's a great question. I think the number one reason it's hard is because the system isn't built for this kind of change. So I'm a parent, Don, of 3 children, and when I was starting our school, even my wife was like, I don't know if we're going to send, our child there. It's because there's so much risk, right? Mm-hmm. And so, there is nothing, a parent can talk about all sorts of things at any time. Their politics, they're this, they're that, but there's nothing more important or more precious to a parent than their child, right? And their child's future. And school directly in all of our minds connects to how our child will grow and develop. So to get families committed to a school like this is hard. You're swimming upstream. I think there are a few reasons why we've tried to be successful, or I'm grateful that we've been successful. Some of the schools that, just to put a fine point on it, there have been 6 schools over the last 2 years in New York City that have closed, that are small, innovative, and independent. And there are 2 of us who have survived. And I think one really important reason that we've survived is that Denise and I are both educators, not just educational thinkers, not just we care about educators, but I spent 15 years in the classroom. I spent 5+ more years in education leadership. And so we're steeped in what actually works. More schools need to be driven and run by real accomplished educators, number one. Number 2, because a school isn't just a business, but here's what number 2 is. Number 2 is you also have to be a business. and everybody wants to do everything at once. And that means, for example, to the question here, sometimes some of these schools make too large of a commitment to their building, to their space, to their bricks and mortar. Then we were faced with COVID, and so many of these financial obligations overwhelm them. So being able to understand that you can't accomplish all the innovation and all of the programs and all of the goals that you want. And here's number 3. While you have to understand that there's a short term to your school, you always have to make decisions that are based on your long term. When schools start admitting students or families that want different things, when schools start making decisions that work towards the interests of just those families, you move away from your mission and your vision, and you have to stay fully aligned with who you are. So number 1, a school is a school, not a business. But number 2, your school is a business. And number 3, you have to make smart decisions that align with the mission and vision of your school and your business. Does that help answer a little bit, Don?
Totally, yeah. And I'm thinking of all the other schools that have closed down and how some of these would, if they were addressed, would have helped. So Andrew, there's a question coming from the audience. It says, how did you find the building for start in the year 1?
Yeah, so we looked at all different opportunities, and we ended up taking a short-term sublease for that first year, knowing that we weren't going to be there for a long time, but that it helped save money on our bottom line. Our first year, we were 12 kids, Don. I often joke that we were a little bit more like a play group than a school at that time, right? And so we didn't buy the place that set our vision. We rented the place that we could afford at that time. So we happened to find a place that didn't want a long-term tenant because they were going to develop that building. And what ended up happening was we ran into COVID. And then when COVID happened, it was actually a large benefit for us because we weren't tied to any lease, and we could then get a great deal with a landlord that helped kind of give us incentives and opportunities as we were growing.
Yeah. When you say the sublease thing, I'm thinking it's almost Airbnb, like just thinking differently about how you might, lease a building, right?
That's right. Because our first year parents are very different than our 5th year parents who are coming next year. Our first year parents were visionaries, Don. They were artists. They were innovators themselves, right? We weren't yet mainstream, so we weren't able to get mainstream parents. So we got a building that fit, that those parents could meet. There was a follow-up question. Was it like a warehouse? In a sense, yes. It was just a wide open space, right? But it wasn't large like a warehouse. It was small like a storefront.
Right. Andrew, I'm going to come back to my list of questions. Why is your school different than any other middle school?
Great question. So the first middle school was founded in the very early 20th century. There was this unique confluence of events, a really high influx of immigration, of movement towards ending child labor and improvement of schools. And so people started to understand that, what are we going to do with young people who had traditionally not attended schools? They'd gone to work or never attended. So they came up with this idea of this junior high school. And probably about 50 or 60 years later, they developed this philosophy of what they called the middle school concept. The middle school concept was the first crystallization of what we're trying to do. It's understanding that young people at this age need a school that's matched to who they are developmentally. Here's the problem, Don. We see this over and over in education. We know what the right things to do are, but schools don't do them. What makes us different is not that I came up with brand new ideas out of whole cloth that nobody has thought of before. The difference is that we do them. We don't do what doesn't work, and we do what matters for this age. Let me give you an example. Movement matters. Physical education is a waste, right? So rather than making kids get into a uniform, however many times a week to do push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups, that does nothing for long-term physical health. right? We design creative movement programs that include parkour, capoeira, and that engage young people in ways that they care about and that engage their lives. So that's just one example. Another silly example is our school starts at 9 a.m., whereas the traditional middle school will start as early as 7:45, 8 o'clock. Kids are not ready to learn. And if school starts at 8 o'clock, that means they had to get up even earlier, right? And we know that the circadian rhythms of young people go later and later. So these are two silly examples, but spread throughout our school is looking at what young people really need, in investing in the research that we know of what works, and then building a school around those things, not just writing words on a website, but building the daily schedule that matches what we know.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because I've thought about that because I've worked on the program design of a new school that opens in East Harlem in the fall, and I was thinking a lot about exercise, PE, and thinking, well, how can you just build that into the school day as opposed to a PE class?
Yeah.
And so my big idea that I pitched Apple, which they wouldn't buy, was to could we integrate their watches, their software, like something like that, where you could, track your health, which kids would be much more interested in. They didn't buy the idea, but and to your second point about time, I teach, as you know, a high school class in design thinking and entrepreneurship, and I refuse to teach that class if it's not till later in the morning. I am not teaching it at 8 o'clock, and I don't care. I'm just not doing it.
Totally.
And they've been good enough to, accommodate me, but I totally hear you.
Totally. And think about how many teachers for so long have been like, this class is awesome and this class is a mess. And then you're like, when is that class? And one teacher is like, oh, it's at the end of the day, or it's at the beginning, because we know that kids learn best at certain times and for certain lengths of times, but schools just ignore these things, right? Just because they've always done it that way.
No. And so actually the last period of the day is when I teach all my classes. And nobody wants to teach then. Oh no, they're not at all. You just have to frame it right for the kids. And they show up last class, the whole thing, and they're fine. And I just want to set them off into a good mood for when they leave. So if the last experience is the best experience of the day, they go off home and it's, it might be a drudgery of homework, but at least they're in a better frame of mind. So I'm a big last of the day class person. I'll take it anytime.
100%, because here's why. It's jujitsu, right? It's using the energy and force that another person brings and working with it, as opposed to layering on top of someone what they don't want, right? And so if we know what people are interested in and what works, then we work with that as opposed to pushing against it.
Totally. Yeah. So Andrew, have you ever thought about starting a high school? And I ask that because that is my area of expertise. That's where I teach.
Well, let's partner, Don. No, but I would love that. But B, I get asked this so much by our parents. The great news about that is that they've loved our middle school so much, and they really do, that they're looking for something like this in high school. They understand what it's meant to them at this age. But our brand is really understanding middle school kids. And I'm embarrassed to say that I understand middle school kids really well. I don't know that I understand high schoolers in the same way. And high school is a different set of expectations. Here's what my dream is and how I've thought about it. Putting together a consortium high school where we get something like 5 to 8 thought leaders, and we put together a plan and then hire someone else. Then we get some small schools like our school as feeder schools for that school. So there's a baseline for admissions. So I don't believe that I could do it, but I would love to be a partner in a process that includes some really interesting ideas and thoughts to help develop it.
Right. Yeah. The problem in the United States with high schools, and I say this having, went to high school and worked at high schools in London, is that the high school here is essentially designed to get the students into college.
That's right.
Not necessarily to learn. And
That's
so, I once I realized this,
That's right.
I stopped the battle. And so what I've done with one school on the Upper East Side is design an awesome elective program for them. So my mantra is the elective is the new major. You can't fight against history and English and the hierarchy of these content areas.
Yes.
And so the person that I'm working on this has said, that what we've done is we've designed a school within a school. And that's where I feel we've had success in the high school, but to compete with everyone else is impossible, because there's a different value system about what the outcome is, and it's, like I said, not necessarily about the love of learning.
It's about the college industrial complex, right? That's the idea, and it's about the brand as opposed to understanding right fits. I'm with you. Now, I think, like you're saying, I think it's possible, but what you're highlighting is it's a different level of risk for families.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that might be an interesting way to go, because the word vocational school is such a dirty word here, like it's seen as so inferior. Like, how might we reposition that notion of vocational school? And that's sort of what James Deck is doing in a way with the new Franklin School, I feel, in Jersey City. It's a new startup school. Part of the Dwight network of schools, which is a for-profit. But they're sort of taking that, I think, in a way. I mean, they're not using the word reposition vocational, but I am, you know what I mean? Because that's what I think there needs to be, and like that. So, Andrew, last question is, and then we can open it up to the audience, is can you talk to us about your new school venture? Because I know that's why you and I were talking, because I've done a lot of work in design thinking and entrepreneurship, and had a lot of failed companies and like that. And that's sort of where I think you were thinking or wanted more info about this.
That's right. So our goal is to revolutionize how we think about middle school education, and that means that our vision has never been building one beautiful, exemplary school on the hill. We're proud of what we've done at our flagship school in Prospect Lefferts, but what we're excited about is growing the model, because our goal is to have children in all communities have access to high quality, progressive, and successful education. That doesn't mean that we believe we're a silver bullet that every child or family fits, but we do believe that more families and more children should have access. So here's our thinking. Every community that we work with, we want to understand the values and principles of that community. So for us here in Brooklyn, right, like the stereotype is DIY, all that kind of stuff, and that's our school here in Brooklyn. But our next school, we're looking into Lower Manhattan, where there's a lot larger commitment to finance, entrepreneurship. And our big idea is that good people make good leaders, as a way to really not have the focus so much on making millions. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is about who we are as individuals and gaining partnership and connections. And so our new venture in Manhattan is organized around that. I'm working with Kate at Hudson Lab to have some of our alumni. We're going to Portugal this summer to do an entrepreneurship program over there, where we're working with a thought leader in business and going through an entrepreneurial process where the young people problem solve and work through their own startup ideas, as a goal of bringing real world casework to our next middle school. And every middle school that is on our plan is of the same way. So our school in Queens would be relevant to international language and culture, and so on, right? It's making sure that our communities are represented in the themes and ideas of our school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Because the thing about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship skills and entrepreneurship mindset doesn't mean you just have to start a business. You can use those skills you can use in any contemporary workspace. And I mean, that's they're two. And I always make that clear that it's not just the lemonade,
100%.
The vegan wallet. But it's just because you're learning problem solving methodologies, and
that's it. And that's what I say, like, we do a lot of woodworking at our current school here in Brooklyn. And that doesn't mean I want everybody to be carpenters. But to your point, there is a way that career skills lead up to this larger mindset which is about making change in the world, and that we as individuals have the agency and the power to make change. It's not just about fixing a car or building furniture or starting a business. It's about the principles and ideas that we understand and using the skills that we learn to make that happen.
Yeah, it is. But I get the pushback. But Don, they're learning problem solving in mathematics. No, they're not.
They're not. Exactly. They're
not for complex or ambiguous problems, maybe simple or complicated, but there's a whole other problem solving.
They're learning problem answering, Don. They're learning problem answering, not problem solving.
Right. So, Andrew, is there anything you want to tell us that I haven't asked before I push it off to our audience?
Yeah, I guess so. The one thing that I would say is you can do it, right? Like I try to, whenever I speak with people, I try to let them know, like, I'm just some random, ridiculous, not great looking person who decided to start a school. You can do it. It's not easy. Get a partner, get some people behind you, but you can do it. So if you have an idea, you do some research, do some work, build that team. You can do it. Let's make it happen.
Right. Awesome. So, Andrew, it's great to talk to you again. And yeah, so inspiring. I mentioned this to you when I met you first, and you were firing these questions at me. And I said to you, like, because I was so out of it, because I've been in this space, but I've backed out of it because of such disillusioning and just gone right back to the classroom. And I've been saying to people, I never want to work with an adult for the rest of my life. I'm just not interested. And when I had the conversation with you and you were asking me questions, I was like, oh my God, as someone is asking these questions, but I literally hadn't had a conversation like that. And Lucy will tell you this in like 2 or 3 years, because I've backed so far out of that space. So that was good for me to actually, you push me back into thinking about these things again. Yeah. So thanks for that. All right, Lucy, you're back.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple questions that were of my interest and others in the chat. One is, I would love to know what your overall schedule is like. So why don't we start there? Like, if you've taken into consideration the needs and research around middle school kids, it sounds like you have. What does that look like? How have you innovated on the schedule? But that's always the conundrum of every school, right?
Totally. So first thing is, we start a little bit later. We start at 9. But then when students come in, we have a full school community meeting. So for the first 20 minutes, we do things like yoga, meditation, shares. We help young people transition from the outside world into school, but not in a way like a traditional homeroom, put your thing on the desk, the teachers, that, right? Like, we have them be actively present, right? If that makes sense. Then we have our 2 core content academic courses in the morning that are double-sized. And so our morning classes are 80 minutes long, whereas a traditional period in school is going to be about 42, 43 minutes long, because young people need that time, not just to understand something, but then to apply it, practice it, and work through it. And that's also the time that we know that once young people are awake, and it takes a while for them to wake up, but once they are, that's the time frame where they're able to give their best focus and understand the most challenging ideas. We then have an hour of outdoor lunch every day, because young people benefit from running and playing around outdoors. And when I say outdoors, we were talking earlier, I'm originally from Chicago. So what people say is cold is often not cold. I say it's just about layers. You just got to learn how to layer. And so it's helping young people get that sun, get that developmental experience. Some people are like, why do you give an hour to lunch and recess? Can't you make it? How do you not give a full hour every day for young people just to decompress, just to have fun? And then our afternoons, to Don's point, are all about electives and creative and exploratory learning, right? So our core academic classes are integrated, humanities and STEM in the morning. And then afternoon, we have classes like Genius Hour. So we lean into a young person's creativity and passion. That's 60 minutes every day where students work on their own personal passion projects. That's inspired by Google's 20% time. We have Studio, which is our kind of 21st century talent program that includes, right, digital media, woodworking, visual arts, and the like. And then we have an hour every day for socio-emotional learning. I always say you can tell a school's value by how they build their daily schedule. And so if a school tells you that they care about a young person's emotional well-being, what are you really doing every day to make sure that happens? And so that's how we think about it. I hope that helps answer the question a little bit.
Yeah, and I keep on thinking about my kids' experience, and where I live. Um, we came from the city, from a progressive private school, and that was more student focused. And I found it to be the traditional public school. It was fine. I mean, it's not a bad experience, but I don't think most people know what they're missing. And it's this compliance, um, control factor in public schools that
That's right.
doesn't let kids reach their full potential. So
Oh,
at the high school in the town where you and I grew up, it's a great high school, top 10 in the state, but it doesn't mean that the school is right for your kid.
that's right.
And everybody knows at GBN that it's great for the super high achieving kids who will take advantage of everything. And then the kids who have super special needs. But in between, the kids who haven't found themselves yet,
That's right.
there's an opportunity for innovation.
That's right. That's right.
And so this is absolutely fascinating to me. One
Wait,
person.
I'm sorry, Luke, can I just build off that
Yeah.
for a second? That is to this idea that there is no single school model. There is no silver bullet. We need more schools and more school models that reach more different kinds of kids and give young people more different kinds of experiences. Sorry, I just wanted to, that's the idea.
I think the other thing too that I think about the ecosystem where I'm at is also training the parent, or not training, encouraging
Yeah.
parents to understand
Yeah.
that there's not one path to success. There's not one path to the Ivy League.
Yeah.
Like we have to kind of let go of that. And I think that's another part of the conversation too. I mean, so how do you work with parents? It sounds like your parents are pretty open to this because they're choosing to be there and they're artistic and they're open, they're progressive themselves. Do you do any work with parents in your school to kind of
Well, here's the thing.
understand where you're coming from?
Yeah. First of all, and this is true, it has to work. If you're going to color outside, I always said I was going to be the first teacher fired if my classroom wasn't the most successful classroom in the school. Do you know what I mean? Because I was coloring so far out of the lines. I was on the chopping block if it wasn't for the fact that my students learned more than all of their peers in other classrooms. And so it has to work. Let's be honest. Just because someone has an idea doesn't mean it will work. That's not what I mean. But we do know that innovative ideas work. Does that make sense? And the difference between those two things? There's all kinds of project-based learning. Just because something's a project doesn't mean it's high-quality project-based learning. So you got to do high-quality stuff in order for it to work. And if you do that, if you understand what really works, it will. And parents, I think, respond to that idea. My history of being successful in the classroom, leading other schools, and then coming here. So I'm not mainstream, but I always say, I want to go like this. I want to be clear enough about who I am that I'm inviting people in and pushing people away. Because if this school isn't for you, I want you to know that too. Does that make sense?
Love it. That's great. That's perfect. One of our attendees asked about if the curriculum, and if you are incorporating this UN Sustainable Development Goals into the curriculum in any way. Are your kids aware of those, and is that part of the projects that they develop?
It's not at our current school. I'm not against them in any way, but we are not aligned with any specific kind of movement. What we are is open to what young people are interested in and connecting this with academic, SEL, and career skills and tools. So where there are projects that make sense, for example, we worked with students to design and build an aquaponics ecosystem, then we'll work towards sustainability in the environment. Our students also design and engineer a sustainable tiny house that integrates concepts that I'm sure are in that framework, but it's not something that we adhere to or are grounded in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I feel like they're not meant to be. The SDGs aren't academic standards,
Uh-huh.
which is another thing. But I think with any kind of framework or standards related to education, if you're doing it well, you can align to it. You
Makes
know, you
sense.
know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah,
it,
totally.
so it sounds like you're probably doing it without saying
Without knowing it, yeah.
so that's the difference. And we've had some comments here. Mano has been saying that you've motivated her, that she wants to start a school. So you guys are going to have to be in touch. I think about that. And
Absolutely.
and then I had another question for you, and I can't remember what it was. So what's the plan? I guess we're wrapping up here. What's the plan for the? What's your? How do you do strategic planning? And what's the next if you do that? And what's your next phase? What are you looking towards? What do people need to know about what's coming in the future for your school?
Yep. So we have 3 stages in our strategic plan. The first stage was our first 5 years. We'll be entering our 5th year next year. That was making sure that we had proof of concept, that our model would work. And the 2 poles that we needed was that it was academically effective and economically efficient. That means our spending per pupil is less than traditional schools. That means that we have an economic model that's justified to continue. This goes back to your question earlier, Don, what's happened at other schools. If you're paying too much per pupil, you need too much coming in to make it last. So that was our first 5 years. We've accomplished that and under budget over 4 years. Our second step over the next 10 years is to build out one innovative school model in each one of New York City's 5 boroughs. So my oldest sometimes says in each one of New York City's 4 boroughs, because she likes to ignore Staten Island as one of the 5 boroughs. But that's stage 2. And stage 3 is moving to work into a professional development model that might look something like what Acton Academies does, which helps train school leaders in other communities across the country that we would not run, but we would help mentor, advise, and coach schools to build their own models.
Yeah, Don shares your son's thoughts about Staten Island too.
I was going to say that there's a question from Tracy, and Tracy will really appreciate that. So, Andrew, Tracy is asking, and Tracy is actually a colleague of mine, an amazing educator, and we have great conversations all the time. Yeah, you have to meet her. She's awesome. And Tracy is asking, curious about the high schools that your students will attend.
It's a great question. So our commitment to families is that we will help you find the right fit high school for your child. For us, it's not about a brand. Some of our students are ready for some of the highest performing high schools in the city, specialized high schools from Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, or independent schools on down. But some of them are looking for something different. And so our students actually tend a range from specialized schools, highly selective high schools, tier 1 or tier 2 independent schools. We have students at iSchool, maker schools, design work schools that lean into this kind of learning. I say about a third of our students are engineers, about a third of our students are creatives, and about a third of our students are still kind of working through where they want to go. And so we work with individual families to help find the right place. Our promise is to build a list of schools and help them get accepted to at least one of their top 3.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Tracy.
How do you here? And here's a kind of a somewhat related question. Do you have kids that have special needs at all? Do you have, and how do you support? Both my kids are neurodiverse and have gone to a place called Landmark College, which I love. And I'm wondering if how you support neurodiverse learners if they're part of your school.
Absolutely. In our first year, we were not ready with all of the supports that were important. Over each subsequent year, we built out stronger and stronger supports. So in this past year, we had a full-time coordinator for learning differences. We had a full-time social worker. We had learning specialists in every grade, in every classroom. And we also try to be clear with families about what services we can provide, what services will need family support and help on. We won't say no, but we just want to be clear that if you're expecting me to be the expert in X, we can't be right now. We want to work with you to get that expert so they'll be able to do it. But as a small school, we may not be able to afford it yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think too, with schools that are more experiential, that sometimes those learning differences are not so apparent. Like it's such a better environment for everybody that,
100%.
you know, the playing field is a little more even as a result
Totally.
of it too.
Yeah, and it, if I can just say something clearly, some of this stuff shouldn't even be an issue at traditional schools, but schools and teachers sometimes care about the most ridiculous things that don't matter. Who cares if a child is chewing gum or needs to stand up? Do we really care about that stuff? Does that like traditional schools could do that too? Sure, that's in our wheelhouse. We do it easy, no problem. But that's simple stuff that all schools could do really too,
It's about being flexible. It's about
being flexible. It's about making big things, and small things, and not mixing the two up.
Yeah, no, Andrew, you're reminding me is like, this whole thing of uniform checks and
Yes.
and like, I'm like, let the students decide the rules and there'll be no problem. I guarantee you, you know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
do it with them.
Totally.
And that's stuff that the majority of educators get caught up on is just ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
So, right? It's so silly. So there's another question from Ekaterina, who's in our audience, and she asks, how do you recruit teachers, mentors, leaders?
That is a great question. What we try to do is send out to the world who we are. And what we've been fortunate is to receive interest from also, people across the country and even outside the world, to be honest with you, about learning more about our school. Some of those conversations lead to positions. We currently, I believe, have 14 full-time teachers and staff at our school. So, not 100 or 9,000. We don't, we only have, a certain number of spots, but we've been fortunate, right? Like, as they say, if you build it, people will come. Here's the thing. Teachers can be amazing, but too often they're stuck in systems that suck. Apologies if that language is blue in this context, but, teachers are thirsty for communities like this, right? And so we don't have to do much like kind of marketing of that. We get a lot of interest.
Right.
You mentioned earlier, Don and Andrew, a network of progressive schools that you belong to. What is that network? Do we have a link to that?
Yeah, that's called the Innovative Schools Cooperative, and the website is theinnovativeschools.com. And we have schools from Brightworks in San Francisco that some of you might have heard of, to Newview in Boston, and schools everywhere in between. Basically, no school is required to be any type of way except looking into innovative, high leverage programs that work.
Tracy has another question for us. She's asking how many teachers are at the school, but let me give you some background. I think Tracy might be looking for a new job. No, Tracy and I have been joking all year about like who's going to get fired first, you or me.
And we'd be lucky to have both of them.
Yeah,
Tracy's asking how many teachers. So
you know what's funny is that over the last month or so, we've gotten a lot of interest in where we don't have a position, but it's like, hey, let's talk, let's figure something out, let's see if there's right. If people have been open to kind of like wrangling a few different parts, we're open. We're always open and interested to wonderful fits.
Right. So what is your total staff, Andrew? Is it like
our total staff right now, I believe, is 14 teachers, full-time teachers and staff.
Wow.
Okay. I think half the battle too with teachers finding the right fit for themselves school. And, I started out
Okay.
in Chicago public schools, and I think my philosophy it was more progressive than the schools I was in. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like trying to put a square peg into a round hole or vice versa.
That's right.
So, helping young teachers figure out where they can go to make a difference, I think is
Yeah.
really important. I think schools of ed need to do that. And so if I were 30 years younger, I'd be looking at this Innovative Schools Network and saying, these are the kinds of schools I want to be part of. And so if anybody's listening who's in a teacher ed program, think strategically about what you want to do, because you only have so many years to kind of plot your career until you get old and expensive like me. So, I think being strategic about one's career is really important. And I also don't
Yeah.
think people necessarily need to be in the classroom for 40 years either. Like, there are other roles you can do in schools to support learners without necessarily being in a classroom. So
Yeah.
I think
That's
that's really interesting. Don, are you any other questions for you?
No, I'm good. I'm just one. I don't know if there's any more audience ones. I don't see anything.
Tracy did say she did follow up on the high school question by saying there's always been pushback at the middle school level in New York City because of the app. There was an app in the something process and hoops that you have to go through to get to accepted to schools, and the hoops that have become more conventional. And you know what? It's similar. It's similar in Chicago too. You have to have perfect test scores, perfect attendance, perfect whatever to get into the selective enrollment schools, which are considered like the cream of the crop. And so it stigmatizes the neighborhood schools for particularly for yuppie type families, and it puts incredible pressure on kids. So it sounds like it's a similar thing in New York too, in
It
terms of
is, unfortunately. There's public school choice. It's now in a lottery system organized by tiers. So based on your grades, you're put into one of three tiers. And then within those tiers, you're accepted to school matches based on lottery numbers. So it's fairly equitable, but fairly complicated. And there's challenges, it's rife with challenges all the way through.
Well, I'm excited to see how you grow and what happens and follow your journey. So thank you so much for being here. And
Thanks for having me.
Don, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah. So Andrew, it's great to talk to you again and hear about your new venture. And like I said, it's always great to talk to other innovators in this space. And we want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your great knowledge and experiences with us.
Thank you so much. It was my honor.
So thanks, Andrew. We're so glad to have you here. Just a couple reminders to our friends out there. We have our AI event coming up August 7th. We're going to be in Philadelphia in a little over a week. And our next conversation is another really interesting school. I met someone from Springhouse, and Andrew, this actually might be of interest to you, this event, but I met somebody from Springhouse, which is in Virginia, at the 100 Summit. And 100.org is a Finnish organization that spotlights innovative schools and programs. And it might be a place that you might find kindred spirits. And Springhouse is also very progressive. I don't know if they're part of your innovative group, but they're super interesting schools. So Jenny Finn is going to be here July 7th for our next conversation, and I hope you all come back for that. And then again, you can find us at Linktree/Actionable Inno and be part of our community and get involved with things. We're getting there with what we're trying to do, and we'd love to have more people be a part of it. So that's it for now. But thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you at the next conversation on July 7th. I'm going to end the broadcast, and we'll see you all soon.